Hey everybody, this is Kevin and welcome back to another Saturday Sports Card Show. And today's a special one in that I've got probably 5 or 6 autograph cards here. Let me see for sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that I got recently signed in person. So these are not TTM, these are not purchased. These are base cards that I took out to a ball game and had signed personally. And I'll give you a quick backstory. Was it June 13th? I was watching the Diamondbacks game at home, and the announcers made comment that Alek Thomas, who was one of our better prospects, he got sent back down to the minors to work on some hitting. He hasn't been hitting so well, and we got a great hitting coach down in AAA. So he was sent down there to kind of get back into the swing of things, so to speak. And they made a comment during the game that, yeah, Alek Thomas is doing great for the Reno Aces as they're playing the Las Vegas Aviators this week. I looked over at my wife and I said, oh, they're in town. So I looked up on the schedule, the calendar. Sure enough, the Aces were playing the Aviators. So I said, hey, let's go to the game tomorrow night. And she said, that's a great idea. So in preparation for that, I got together some cards that I knew of players that would be there. In fact, there's one card in here that I didn't take with me, but I somehow acquired, which I'll tell you about here in a second. And just had a great time. We got there right as the gates were opening, and actually a few minutes early, so we were first in line. Got to our seats and hung out just outside the dugout there in the front row, and sure enough, here come the players. So here's the story. We get into our seats, and I look up, and down in front of us in the front row is a man and a woman, both with stacks of baseball cards. And I'm like, oh, apparently I'm not the only one with this great idea. So I go down there with my cards, and I said, hey, is this where the baseball card collectors hang out? And they chuckled and said, yeah, what you got? I said, well, I brought some Diamondback cards with me. Oh, yeah, who'd you bring? So I started naming off some names, and I happened to mention the name Buddy Kennedy. And this one gentleman says, oh, I didn't think about him. I didn't bring any Buddy Kennedys. So I was like, well, I had a duplicate. So I said, well, here you go. And he goes, you know Kyle Lewis is with us now, right? I said, yeah, but I don't have any of his D-back cards, so I don't have any of his cards because he doesn't have any D-back cards yet. And he goes, well, I've got an extra one, so here you go. So suddenly we are now trading back and forth, which is what baseball cards are all about, right? So we're trading and we're telling stories and, oh, I got this card, I got that card, oh, we're just excited. And this woman turns to me and says, hey, did you bring a Doug Drabek card with you? And I'm like, Doug Drabek, I know the name, but I couldn't picture him. But my memory bank was like going way back in time, and I'm like, Doug Drabek. Why do I know that name? She said, well, he was a pitcher for the Pirates. I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of remember that. But what does that have anything to do with AAA baseball in Las Vegas? And she said, well, he's the pitching coach for the Reno Aces. I'm like, I did not know that. So she whips out, she had a bunch of them. She whipped out an 88 Topps base card. And she said, here you go. So I'm like, that's the guy that I know. And sure enough, he was actually the first one out of the tunnel up to the dugout. And he came up and we're like, Mr. Drabek, can we have your autograph, please? And it was just me, this man, and this woman. It was just the three of us. And actually, there was a fourth guy who had a baseball who was getting signed. But yeah, he was very kind. He came up and he signed the ball for us. And this was totally unexpected. This was the last signature I expected to walk away with a gifted card from a very, very kind card collector. Her name was Kathy. That's all I know about her. But a very sweet woman, and she was gracious enough to give me that card to have signed. So that was pretty cool. And I ought to show off a little bit. Of course, being in Las Vegas, the Aviators are their AAA team for the Oakland A's, which is ironic because now the Oakland A's are moving to Vegas. But so I was obviously in the minority because I was rooting for the Aces, not the Aviators. But that's okay. I sat on the visitor side, which was appropriate, so I was in light company for the most of the evening. But we got some nice souvenir cups, even grabbed a helmet that they were serving food in. That was pretty cool. So we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And by the way, you might notice that ink is in blue. So while we're waiting for all the players to come out, Kathy asked me, she's like, do you have a marker? I said, oh yeah, I've got a little Bic Sharpie, permanent marker. And she's like, oh no, you don't want to use black, you want to use blue. I'm like, well, that's all I brought. She's like, ah. So she reaches into her bag. She had a dozen of these things. So she hands me a blue Sharpie, which in hindsight was fortuitous because this is a much better color on some of these cards that I'm about to show you. So anyway, next story. Next player comes out, Blaze Alexander. And you just got to love that name, Blaze, right? Now, I've got Blaze's autograph on cards that I've bought from Ethan, and, well, that might be the only place I've gotten him. But this isn't my first Blaze Alexander auto, but it's my first in-person Blaze. So he comes up, again, the same four of us, hand him items, and I hand him my card, and I hand him the blue Sharpie, and I hand it to him like this. I'm like, oh no, I forgot to take the cap off. So he's fumbling around. He's got his gloves on. He's got these wristbands that he's trying to strap on and sign at the same. He's just doing a lot, right? So I reach down, I pull the cap off, and he took the cap and he took the pin. I'm like, okay. So he signs the card, right? Well, he's handing the other stuff back to the other people, and he hands me my card and he hands me the pin, but he's still got the cap. So I'm like, please, can I have my cap? And he goes, no. And I'm like, I kind of chuckled. I'm like, okay, I need the cap. It's like, I'm not giving you the cap. I'm like, but I was like struggling. I'm like looking for help. Like, does anyone else understand my predicament? I need the cap. Why isn't he giving me the cap? And then I pointed at his hand. I'm like, I need the cap. He looks down, he sees the cap, and he realized, oh, this cap. He turned to me and said, I thought you wanted my ball cap. I'm like, no, that's your ball cap. I can't know. And he goes, oh, I wasn't going to give you my ball cap. I'm like, no, I just need the cap to the pin. So we had a funny little exchange there. That was a lot of fun. We both laughed and chuckled about it. And then he went on his merry way. He had to do warm-ups and all that other good stuff. So that's my story behind the Blaze Alexander card. The next one up was Luis Frias. He's a pitcher that I first knew about when he pitched for the D-backs, but he struggled as of late, so they sent him down. And I was perplexed at this one because he signed it Luis Frias 60. Now, I couldn't tell if that was a 67, 69, 64. I just couldn't tell. Then I'm like, well, maybe that's just part of the name Frias, because you see there in his uniform, he was 60-something on the back of the jersey. So he signed it, and after the fact, I'm like, well, what does that mean? And I'm hoping that maybe you all can help me out with this, because I'm still confused, to be honest with you. Let me pull up another card here that I use for reference. So I have this old card. I didn't take this with me, but I pulled this Luis Frias out, and it's definitely 65, which is kind of what it looks like in the background on his back there. So I'm like, okay, 64, 67, 69. It's not 65. So I'm like, well, let me go to the program and see what number he is in today's game, which was on the 14th, by the way. So I look at the pictures and I find Luis Frias, number 55. So I was totally confused then, and I'm still totally confused now. So if any of you can explain to me why he might have signed 67 or 64 or 69, please let me know. I don't think that's a 5. That's a pretty rough 5 if it is. It might be, but I doubt it. So anyway, that's my Luis Frias story. Kind of an interesting character. He didn't say much, kind of quiet. He just nonchalantly reached down and signed, and I said, thank you, Mr. Frias, and he kind of looked at me and went, huh. Just kind of gave me that look, huh, sound. Like, well, that's more than I expected, so that was pretty cool. All right, so the next player up was Buddy Kennedy. Now, Buddy Kennedy is, again, a guy who played for the D-backs. I saw him playing his inaugural game, on TV, of course. But what's interesting about him is he is the grandson of the famous player Don Money. So from yesteryear, if you ever heard that name before, I don't think it makes mention of it in his description here. Grew up in the same... In fact, he is good friends with Mike Trout. I do remember reading about, or seeing an interview making regards to that. But anyway, so Buddy Kennedy came up in the D-backs, and they sent him down. He was struggling. But anyway, so he's one of the... I'm going to set him on a special stand because he's one of the guys that really, really did well. In fact, he hit his first home run for the D-backs while one of the announcers was in the stands interviewing his grandfather at the game. And while they were talking on microphone, you hear the crack of the bat, the camera quickly panned over, and you see the ball going over the fence. And during the interview with his grandfather, Don Money, that was a pretty special moment. So that was pretty cool. But unfortunately, he got sent down to AAA, which happens on occasion to these guys. But he's a super nice guy, and He was very willing to come over and sign for us. So, in fact, I would have had 2 signed, but I gave one to the other guy that needed a Buddy Kennedy. He got it signed, and he was so grateful to me that I gave him a card. I'm like, well, you gave me a nice Kyle Lewis card, so, you know. Now, speaking of Kyle Lewis, I'll show you what I took with me, or I'm sorry, what the guy gave me. He gave me this Kyle Lewis card. Now, as you can see, it's not signed, unfortunately. Kyle, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but when he's getting ready for a game, he's getting ready for a game. And by that, I mean he was focused on the game. Now, he did sign a couple cards for the man and the woman, but it was probably the timing of it all, because they announced, everybody please stand, remove your hats for the national anthem. And that's when he was about to sign this card, and then he had to run off onto the field. So it was just bad timing. But I kind of hoped that when he came back to the dugout, he'd sign, but he just blew right past me, right into the dugout. So he had his game face on. I'll give him that. A little unfortunate. I did not get the Kyle Lewis card, but you win some, you lose some. But let me make way for my favorite autos of the day. 2 of the same player. Check those out. Alek Thomas, this is his base 2022 card, rookie. And this is his Stars of the MLB rookie card. And that, see what I mean about the blue ink? Is that blue just, in fact, let me take it out of the top loader. It's kind of concealing some of its beauty. Look at that. That card is just awesome. Now, here's the interesting thing. Of all the players that we met, only a few of them, and I mean a few, literally 3, Alek, Buddy, and Luis Frias, were the only 3 that were playing that night, that were there to sign autographs, that have played for the D-backs. And I did see Tyler Gilbert by chance, but he was running out to the bullpen, so no one got a chance to get his autograph. That was just unfortunate, because I did have his card as well. But Luis Frias, again, he's a pitcher. He had to get out to the bullpen. He was a little quirky, not the most extroverted individual. So when it comes down to position players, it came down to Alek and Buddy. They're the only 2 position players that have been, well, I would say are the best 2 on the team, because they've spent time in the big leagues. And hands down, of all the players in the dugout, these 2 were the nicest. So that said a lot to me about the 2 that made it to the top. Unlike a bunch of these wannabes that were in the dugout playing that night, that thought they were all that, and I'm putting the air quotes up, but they weren't really all that, because they hadn't made it yet. These 2 individuals had made it yet. They were humble, and they were polite, and they were just down-to-earth human beings. And they know it's a game. They know not to take it too seriously, but to enjoy it, but to be respectful and nice to the fans. Because if it weren't for the fans going to the ball games, there wouldn't be baseball. Think about it. There would not be any games if there weren't fans to go pay the tickets, buy the concessions, pay for the programs, and all that other good stuff. So these 2 got it. They realized it. And they're so young, and I was so impressed with their demeanor. I mean, these guys are literally less than half my age, and I said sir to them. I said, thank you, sir, to Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas, can I have your autograph? Yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you, sir. I mean, he's younger than my own child. All 3 of my children are older than these guys. But I called him sir out of respect for not just their position in baseball, but for who they are as people. So I just wanted to share that with you. If you have a chance to go to a AAA game, by all means do it. The tickets are dirt cheap. It's AAA. You're not going to see, it's not the big hullabaloo like you get at a Major League game. But if you get to go to a AAA game, find out who they're the affiliate team for and who might have been sent down, and grab some baseball cards and go get their autographs. And trust me, they appreciate it, because it reminds them of the days they were in the majors. They don't feel like they're just a slump down in the minors with no attention and no respect. When you show up with their cards, it kind of reminds them like, hey, you know what? I am somebody. I can get back there and do it some more. So do that if you can. It's a lot of fun. Grab yourself some souvenirs. We got these cups and this awesome little helmet. which my granddaughter thinks is for her. I'll let her think that for a little while longer till I stash it away in a box somewhere. So with that, guys, that's the rest of my the end of my video. It's about 15 minutes today. Sorry it went a little longer than normal. I talked fast because I knew I had to get through it pretty quick. So I apologize if my speaking was a little faster than normal, but I had a lot of little stories to get through. So with that, guys, hope you enjoyed the little video. Have a great rest of your weekend. God bless, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.